Hi all, and welcome back. I got a report card from John. It seems I got a big fat F minus on the 12,000 furlong part at the end of my last video. I should have known I would goof up the math. I'm good at connect the dots, but terrible at math. I'm not too concerned about the 12,000 furlongs in Revelation, because it's not really a time span that I'm looking at on my end of days timeline at all. If it really is a day count, it would still be the 33.33 biblical years. That's a long span of time. So I'm putting the 12,000 furlong count on the back burner for now, and I'll still think on that one. But I think I see why I got a big fat F on that one. Oh, I know others saw it too. Looking at that last timeline in my last video here, this one about day counts of Jesus' lifespan, there should be a year subtracted off of all those counts. Like at the baptism, Jesus would have only been a little over 28 years. And not 29 years. So I looked at the rules for counting again. For me, things get confusing when working with a very short span of time and not hundreds of years. So the rules are: you must subtract 1 year when calculating the time span between a BC year and an AD year, because there is no 0 year on that scale. 1 AD immediately follows 1 BC. So you add the absolute values of the years and then subtract 1 to account for the missing 0 year. For example, to find how many years between 1000 BC and 1000 AD, you would add 1000 plus 1000, then subtract 1. The time span is 1999 years. So I decided to go back to the drawing board and start again and draw it out. There are two different methods of counting. Look at this slide I'm showing here, and maybe I can explain it. At the top, you can see that when we count months, month number 1 starts on day 1. But when we count years, we start on day 0, like in the year 2000. So by the time we get to the year 2002, or 2 AD, we have completed 2 years. The dopes who changed our calendar goofed it up pretty good. They didn't count the 0 year. Look at the purple timeline at the bottom here. The way they were thinking of it is like the way we think of when we are counting our months on our calendar. So in their minds, they are saying that 1 AD was the first year, and that 1 BC was the year before that. They simply jumped from the year 1 BC to 1 AD. So look at these two methods of counting when they are lined up with each other. And you can see what happens when you drop the 0 year and don't consider it. Like I said, it would be like not considering the year 2000 because it was a big 0 year. And Y2K didn't end the world after all. So just drop it. These two methods of counting are called astronomical and historical. Stellarium does show the 0 year, but history doesn't account for it. Historical counting does not have a 0 year, and that's why when you are adding years in AD to years in BC, you have to subtract 1 year from your total. They did, in effect, drop a year out of the count. And that's why when you are looking at BC years in programs like Stellarium, You have to subtract 1 year in order to get to the correct historical year that you are referring to. I hope that makes sense. And that's exactly where I got totally goofed up in my day counts. Look at how these timelines line up. When you are talking about the historical year of 3 BC, you have to set stellarium to 2 BC. And do you see the orange line that I have drawn here between these timelines? That is the date that I'm looking at on stellarium for the birth of Jesus, not where I was sticking it on my timeline. On stellarium, it is 2 BC, and historical counting sees it as 3 BC. So, my big correction is, if Jesus was born in 3 BC in historical counting, and 2 BC as stellarium sees it, then there is not 2 years and 112 days of the BC years. I'll clean this up so I can take a new look at it. With the astronomical counting, there is actually only 1 year and 112 days of the BC years, which is a total of 478 days. So let's go back to the timeline that I was posting in my video last time, so I can clear up things. This is what the BC day counts should look like, and not marked at the end of 3 BC like I had it. It is 2 BC in stellarium, but in historical counting it is 3 BC. The sign in the heavens and Rosh Hashanah on 9/11 happened on this 2 BC date in stellarium. And we will be looking at that sign in the next video along with the Revelation 12 sign. I mostly wanted to make this quick correction video since it's a whole separate subject. But as a bonus, I think I'll toss in some possible Daniel day counts in a minute here. So, the true day counts of Jesus' life. If he was born in 3 BC and resurrected in 30 AD, then Jesus would have only been 28 and a few months when he was baptized by John, and not 29 like I was saying. And at the crucifixion and resurrection, he would have only been about 31 years and 7 months old at that point. I sure would have liked for my count to have been right, and I could have accounted for the 12,000 furlongs that John wrote about in Revelation. But it really doesn't work out that way on stellarium. And I never try to make stuff fit. I just try to let the clues in the scriptures lead me to some anchor points on my timeline. I'm sure that the 3 great American eclipses were big anchor points, along with the Revelation 12 sign that I'll talk about in the next video. And I'll have some other signs in the heavens that are big anchor points, especially with some of the blood moons as well. So the 12,000 furlongs will have to be put on the back burner for now, and I'll keep them in my mind while studying. Like I said, if it is a day count, then it's a long span of time, 33.33 biblical years. I'm not tossing out everything from my last video either. I'm still very solid on the 1600 furlongs, ending at the blood moon of 3/13 midnight this year, and starting at what would correspond to the baptism date in 2020, which was also 1,260 days from the April 8th eclipse, which marked the date of the resurrection in 30 AD. I think I've got too much evidence from a few different angles pointing to that April 8th eclipse last year to think it was nothing. And I think everyone is feeling that we are quickly running out of real estate here at the end. I'm well aware that many have moved their crucifixion dates out to 2031, 2032, and some even to 2033. I would have to see some compelling evidence and several signs in the heavens that Jesus told us to look for before I would change my mind and look into it much. What I've found so far isn't leading me to look past 2030 or really reconsider 30 AD as the crucifixion year. Even the second coming date that I'm looking at in 2030, it is 12 years and 7 months past the Revelation 12 sign, as well as for the first great American eclipse that darkened 7 Salems way back in 2017. I mean, how much further past all these massive signs that we've been having can we go? Since we are looking at this concept of adding BC and AD years together, and then subtracting a year, I wanted to look at Daniel 9 real quick. I saw someone just the other day literally yelling on his channel about that prophecy and claiming it proves the rapture is on this September 23rd. That's fine, but just know that there are several prophecies to restore and build Jerusalem. Many decrees that went out. So some people just find one that fits their needs for the moment. This is Young's literal translation of the 70 weeks prophecy at the end of Daniel 9. It starts out by saying that 70 weeks are determined, and we know that these are weeks of years, or 7 years per week. So we have 70 times 7, which is 490 years, the total length of the prophecy. And many believe that this 490 years ends with the end of days. Then Daniel tells us that from the going forth of the word to restore and build Jerusalem until the Messiah is 7 weeks and 62 weeks. I'm not sure why he separated off the first 7 weeks. Perhaps it represents a time for rebuilding Jerusalem and the temple after Babylon. So we have a total of 69 weeks here. 7 and 62, that's 69. So that leaves us with 1 week, or 7 years. I made a simple timeline down at the bottom here. It's just a line, 49 years, or the first 7 weeks, then the 62 weeks, or 434 years. The 1 week, or 7 years, at the very end of the line. The total for the 69 weeks is 483 years. So then Daniel writes that after the 62 weeks, cut off is Messiah. The city and the holy place are not his. In the 4th and final verse of this prophecy, Daniel writes that he hath strengthened a covenant with many, and in the midst of the week he causes sacrifice to cease. I've seen people interpret all this in many different ways. Some say it was all already fulfilled with Jesus. I happen to believe that Daniel is telling us that after 62 weeks, Messiah will arrive, but would not be accepted. The city and temple are not his. And he ends sacrifice when he is crucified in the midst of the week. That means after 3.5 years. That is also the time span that I believe was Jesus' ministry. exactly 3.5 years, or 1,260 days, between his baptism and resurrection. It is the midweek point of that final 7 years of the 70-week prophecy. If Jesus was cut off at midweek of Daniel's final 7 years, then perhaps there is still a 3.5 year portion of that prophecy to be fulfilled. So, even though I've seen even more of these decrees cited, these are the three main decrees that went out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. One is written in Ezra 7, which was in the fall of 458 BC. And one was written in Nehemiah 15 years later about a decree in 445 BC. I think most use the Nehemiah years, but I'll use the much earlier prophecy in Ezra chapter 7 because it seems like the decree that provided the financing and resources needed for the project. So let's use the math rules that we just learned about adding BC and AD years. I think the first Artaxerxes decree was in the fall of 458 BC, and Jesus was baptized in the fall of 26 AD. 458 BC plus 26 AD is 484 years. Then subtract 1 year, and we have 483 years. 483 years. That is exactly the 69 weeks of Daniel, isn't it? 69 times 7 is 483. I could definitely see this prophecy this way. The Jewish Messiah is baptized, but never accepted. The city and the holy place are not his. And Jesus did come to end sacrifices and the temple rituals and laws. And then the temple was physically destroyed in 70 AD, 40 years after the crucifixion. I for sure think his ministry ended at the midweek or 3.5 years time span. And maybe we still have the rest of that week, the other 3.5 years on the books, to complete Daniel's 70th week. I should have my next video out pretty quickly, so join me as we have a look at some amazing stellar signs and the conception of Virgo, the Revelation 12 sign and the birth, and also a grand conjunction.